NorthShore University HealthSystem Highland Park is going to provide us tonight with an update. We're pleased to welcome Gabrielle Cummings, President of Highland Park Hospital, and Board Certified Internist Dr. Wallman, for joining us this evening to share information and answer frequently asked questions regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The City of Highland Park truly values its partnership with Highland Park Hospital, and this partnership has increased since the onset of the pandemic, as the hospital is a vital resource and strong collaborator with the city and sister governments serving Highland Park residents. We greatly appreciate their commitment to protecting the health of our community. And first, I'd like to welcome and invite Gabrielle to share an update on operations and healthcare matters, and then we'll turn to Dr. Wallman for a discussion of the COVID-19 vaccine. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Odering and the City Council. I hope everyone's doing well this evening. Gita, can I show slides, or would you all prefer me just to talk through them?
You're welcome to share slides.
Okay. I just have a couple of slides.
I made you a co-host just to make sure.
Okay. Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. I'll try one more thing, and if not, then I will just. Okay. All right. So I wanted to just share take a couple of minutes to share with you all some activities happening at Highland Park Hospital, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Wallman to give you an update on what's really a hot topic around COVID-19 and the vaccination. All of my presentations, I would say this year and for the previous several months, have to do with the pandemic. What have we been doing in healthcare before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic? And I would share with you all the items listed here, activities that were on our radar screen as a healthcare organization before the pandemic, but we became acutely more aware of these as we were in the middle of the pandemic. The first focuses on social determinants of health and health and well-being. So this is the concept of health equity, ensuring that the patients in our communities of all races, ethnicities, socioeconomic status have the appropriate access to healthcare, and being aware that the healthcare market that we've created needs to be accessible to all that are involved in it. We've absolutely seen an increase in patient acuity, with so many people not coming into the hospitals due to COVID, and understandably so. We've seen a shift in patients being sicker as they've come into our facilities, which has required us to really adjust and make sure that we have improved and really strong access for our patients. We've seen, and Dr. Wallman, I'm sure can speak to this, we've seen an amazing increase in the number of virtual care visits that we're doing. We're doing lots of telehealth visits within NorthShore, as well as in the healthcare industry, as well as realizing that we need to personalize medicine. So instead of thinking that one size fits all for healthcare, we now realize that we need to really personalize the medicine and the delivery of healthcare to the patients that we're serving. We are experiencing, like many industries across the country and quite frankly the world, workforce instability. This is driven by a couple of things for us. The first being, before the pandemic, we were seeing an aging of our workforce, where many nurses, doctors, other clinicians were reaching a stage in their lives where they were ready to retire. And that hit us right in the middle of the pandemic, and also have several healthcare members that are tired and that have decided that being part of healthcare is not what they want to do anymore. They want to refocus their efforts on different journeys. And so that's created a significant number of vacancies and has created instability in our workforce, thereby limiting access to healthcare in some ways. Obviously, in our EDs and our Women's Health Pavilion, those areas are not ever closed. And so we've been able to make sure we can keep the operation moving for those areas. Immediate care access is obviously being able to go to something like an urgent care if you don't have a need as acute as an ED. And then there are lots of merger acquisitions and partnerships happening. One's happening in our own organization. NorthShore University HealthSystem is in a pending merger with Edward Elmhurst that will be set to close in January of next year. So what are we doing to really combat and respond to our community in terms of the COVID pandemic, but also making sure that we're being a good healthcare partner? In the upper left-hand box, you'll see that we really are focusing on healthcare equity and inclusion. I am one of the co-directors of health equity for all of NorthShore, and we've been hosting a lot of focus groups in our communities to make sure that we are understanding, learning, and shifting our focus to include all groups of health patients in our community. The upper right, we launched in the middle of the COVID year a mental health first aid training session, which is equipping people in our community to identify and address healthcare crises. And we had outstanding response for this, so much so that we were asked to host a handful of other sessions for individuals interested in getting mental health first aid training. The picture in the bottom left is Dr. Lakshmi Halasiamani, who is our Chief Medical Officer. She does weekly Facebook checkups as well as community updates to make sure people are aware of the happenings around COVID-19. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we continue to be active partners with our community to roll out the COVID vaccine, as well as talk about prevention and what you can do to make sure that you stop the spread of COVID. Most importantly, that you get your vaccination. So hopefully everyone watching and on the video are vaccinated. If not, NorthShore has plenty of availability for the vaccine. We're rolling into booster season now. We're really excited to hear that we've received approval to vaccinate children between the ages of 5 and 11. Dr. Wallman can correct me if I'm wrong, but we now have the ability to vaccinate people from the ages of 5 up to 105. So very excited about that and want to make sure we continue to support our communities in getting vaccinated. We also have a lot of collaborations with educational institutions so that we can promote equity in healthcare. I won't go through all of these, but one of the programs I'm really excited about is our Medical Assistant Pathway Program. That's a partnership with Malcolm X College in the Chicago area, but we have a relationship where we are reaching into communities that are underserved to help expose youth to medical assistant programs where they can come into the organization, become a medical assistant, and get introduced to healthcare careers in a way that they've never been introduced before. We also have launched a mini medical school for high school students that's based out of our Swedish campus. And also we have a connection with the Medical Organization for Latino Advancement. So locally at Highland Park Hospital, I'm really excited to share, and I think most people know this, that we, in October of last year, we launched a formal partnership with Erie Family Health in Waukegan to shift all of their deliveries from another hospital to Highland Park Hospital. Last year, we delivered over 200 new babies and helped moms and dads bring 200 new lives into the world. It has been a really wonderful partnership, and it's been great to see Highland Park Hospital be able to support our community in a different way to make sure that people of all walks of life have access to outstanding health care and bringing their loved ones and their new babies into the world. And last but not least, I just want to make sure that you all know we appreciate your support and all of the love that you've shown us as a community over the past couple of years. We are here to take care of you always and forever. Hopefully we don't have to, but if we do, we want you to know that you have a great healthcare partner in your backyard. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Wallman to talk about COVID-19 and the vaccine.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Wallman.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. As was previously mentioned, I am a Highland Park resident. I have a senior in high school and then a 8th grader at Edgewood. And I was contacted by NorthShore to work as a health ambassador for the community. So that's one of my roles. I'm also a practicing internal medicine physician in Glenview at Covenant Medical Group, and I was the previous president of the medical staff at NorthShore. I also do a bunch of different roles through NorthShore as far as maintaining the integration of affiliate physicians. So I appreciate the opportunity, and as far as I have 3 different topics to talk about around the vaccine. I'm happy to answer any questions in addition to that or around COVID or anything else. So I don't have any slides, but the 3 items I'm going to talk about are the vaccine, COVID vaccine, and fertility and the safety of the vaccine, the concerns about how fast, quote unquote, in which the vaccines were produced and allowed to be given, and then finally the information on the vaccination for kids. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start. And this is constantly changing, but as far as the fertility goes, there has been a bunch of studies that show that the vaccine is safe. There are 3 particular studies that were presented to the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, which is basically a group of fertility doctors that talk about the pros and cons of all the different treatments. And this COVID vaccine did not show any issues with fertility, and it didn't show any problems with early pregnancy outcomes or sperm quality as well. It's a little difficult to test pregnant women, so the fertility doctors did use the embryos that were used for in vitro to try to figure out if there was any issues. They were able to look at these embryos that were undergoing in vitro fertilization and treatments, and there was no change in pregnancy rates and pregnancy loss for patients that were immunized against COVID. There was also a study at University of Chicago, close to us, that shows that embryos that were studied at IVF showed no change in likelihood to produce embryos after exposure to vaccine. So this is a good study to show that giving the vaccine does not affect pregnancy at that time. Also, there was a study at University of Miami that showed there was no change in sperm count in men. Another study, I mean, I hate to give you numbers, but the science is what's important. In the New England Journal of Medicine, which is pretty much the standard when it comes to medical journals, they had actually 35,000 patients who were studied, and these were ages 16 to 54 that were identified as pregnant. And the only thing that they showed in these pregnant women that was higher was that the injection sites of where they got the vaccine was a little bit higher than people that weren't pregnant. But the side effects of headaches, chills, fevers were less in pregnant people as opposed to non-pregnant. There was no issues of any safety issues, safety signals in vaccinated patients. And there is the big issue here is that the risk of getting COVID if you're pregnant compared to getting the vaccine. And you're more likely to have problems with the COVID virus if you're pregnant versus being vaccinated. So that's another huge point. And there are, a bunch of different medical committees and colleges that have agreed that getting vaccinated when pregnant is very important. As time has gone on, as of August 2021, this has been recommended by the CDC that pregnant patients should get the vaccine. And also back in October, it was recommended that boosters were given that were recommended, as Gabrielle said, for pregnant people as well. And there is the possibility for getting the mix and match. As it turns out, the additional Moderna and Pfizer patients who got vaccinated showed about the same improvement in the reduction of COVID in pregnant people. But like I said before, pregnant people are at higher risk of getting having morbidity or dying from COVID versus getting the vaccine. So that I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not someone who specializes in women's health, but this is what we're recommending as far as the pregnant women getting vaccinated. As far as the second topic was the speed of approval, there's a lot of people, patients, news media that are saying that this vaccine was rushed. Speaking to that point, these vaccines were developed quickly, yes, but this has been secondary to much research that's been on other viruses. And that's why it was able to be manufactured so frequently and so quickly, sorry. There's also been a lot of funding, personal and government, to allow firms to run these multiple trials to allow these vaccines to be approved and to prove their safety. This research didn't just start in January when the vaccine was approved. This has been done for years on the SARS virus, which is the bird flu, and the MERS virus, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. So these viruses have been investigated in the past in conjunction with the COVID vaccine in order to develop the vaccine. So a little science, I don't mean to get too technical, but I think this is important. But this virus is an mRNA virus, and the vaccine it's an mRNA vaccine. So when that gets injected into your body, the body reacts by producing a protein. And this protein is recognized as foreign to the body, and that's called an antigen, which triggers the immune response. Once this immune response is established, this vaccine prevents the spike protein if you're infected by the COVID virus to introducing it to the cells, therefore preventing significant morbidity, mortality from the vaccine. Can you get the virus? Absolutely. Are you going to have less severe of a case? Yes, that's true. These RNA vaccines, like I said, have benefited for over 15 years of research. And actually, a lot of the researchers are using this type of vaccine to actually develop cancer vaccines. The problem or the issue when we're testing vaccines is getting people to volunteer for these studies. However, with the pandemic, with the amount of lives that were lost, people step up to the plate. And there was multiple billions that were put into this process to develop this testing. With the large amount of money that was available for the vaccine firms, as well as the public funding, we were able to perform preclinical and then phase trials as well. Believe it or not, there were over 43,000 volunteers that volunteered for this vaccine, and that took 16 weeks to develop. The FDA rushed this vaccine to the front line because the death toll was rising. Believe it or not, Pfizer took 21 days and Moderna took 19 days for emergency use. So what does that emergency use mean? It means the benefits outweigh the risks, and that's why they were approved. As far as overall, how did this all happen? A few different reasons why this happened so quickly. Number one, we had a smart head start because these coronaviruses have been studied for over 50 years. Number two is there's been like I said, over 10 years of research in the mRNA vaccine. Number three, like we said, there were multiple participants who volunteered for the clinical trials. The other thing that was interesting was the government used building facilities that were already established for other areas to use to produce this vaccine. And there we used multiple trials to get this going quickly, and then it was expedited review very quickly. So overall, the risk is not nearly as significant as the reward. So as you can see, even though this was done quickly, it was done thoughtfully and it was done scientifically, which is really good. So that's the story with the quote unquote speed of the formation of the vaccine. Just to wrap up here, just a few words about the vaccination for children. When I was asked to sort of prepare this, the vaccine wasn't approved for kids, and now it is. And what we found is that November 2nd, the beginning of this month, the CDC director recommended vaccines for Pfizer between ages 5 to 11. And these CDC advisors voted 14-0 in favor of getting this child-sized dose of the vaccine. At this point, or as of a couple weeks ago, 78% of Americans 12 and older had gotten at least one shot. And believe it or not, 745 kids and teens less than 18 have died from COVID. Children have accounted for 25% of the new cases as of the end of October 2021. As a result of this, the FDA authorized on 10/29 emergency authorization due to some clinical trials that were done. This is for kids. The Pfizer clinical trial showed a 90.7% protection of a lower dose of this vaccine. And that's the big issue is what dose do we give smaller people as of kids? So what we're finding is that this dose is about the third dose. So we call it micrograms. So it's 10 micrograms compared to 30 micrograms, which is the dose that's given. And in all these trials, only about 6% of kids had fevers compared to 18% of people 16 to 25 years old. And like I said, this pandemic, 1.9 million COVID cases among children 5 to 11 years old. There have been rare cases of myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscles, in teens and adults receiving the higher dose of the vaccine. So there wasn't any sign of this in the lower dose vaccination delivery. There's been no cases in the 3,000 kids that were studied, 5 to 11 years old. The biggest issue with this with kids is that, yes, the kids are, of course, important, but you got to figure 140,000 kids have lost their caregivers due to COVID, due to mental issues, due to the closures of schools. So the sooner we can get this stuff online, then it's going to be very beneficial. We have, in addition to the mild to moderate illness, there's been very few reactions to the COVID with a multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is the long haulers. And this can lead to significant problems as well. And Pfizer continues to study even a smaller dose for kids 2 to 5 years old and then kids 6 months to 2 years old. And then Moderna announced the end of October that they're working on trial as well for 6 to 11 years old as well. The idea overall is that this vaccine is actually a little bit different and actually a little bit safer than some of the vaccines we give our kids already, because the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella, and the chickenpox vaccine actually uses a weakened forms of the live virus, which this coronavirus vaccine does not. And the diphtheria or the Tdap, that has an altered form of bacteria. And believe it or not, the hepatitis has a yeast that's developed too. So overall, this vaccine is safe for kids. It's been studied, and it's really important going forward. So overall, I mean, as Gabrielle said, I mean, this is a widespread, obviously, pandemic problem. And as time has gone on, hopefully this information that I'm giving you and information you can get from your primary care doctor, pediatrician, OB-GYN will allow to improve vaccine hesitancy. But as far as I can recommend at this point, I think it's really important that everyone gets vaccinated. So, I mean, sorry if I'm talking fast. I just wanted to get everything in. But those are those three topics that I was asked to talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to come back at a further time to talk about anything else. So thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Gabrielle. Really appreciate. It is such a comfort to have you as a resource in our community, and we are so appreciative of the incredible efforts that have been made since this began, and frankly, since the hospital was created for the last pandemic. So wanted to just thank you all for everything you've done.